On May 8th, right here, the world witnessed the first appearance of Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost as Pope Leo the 14th. This after only 4 ballots. He is the first ever American Pope. And without further ado, I'm joined by the Papal Posse, editor-in-chief of the CatholicThing.org, Robert Royal, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray. Thank you both for being here. Father, and then Bob, your thoughts on when you saw Pope Leo appear here, and we were all here watching, when you saw an American was announced. You thought what?
I was very surprised because I was of the opinion no American will ever get elected Pope.
Like the rest of us.
Exactly. So I kind of, like stereotypical thinking, was guilty of that. But no, it was very beautiful to see him come out. He was wearing the traditional vestments. He gave a good message, and then he gave a very traditional blessing of the Pope as the new Pope. I was very pleased with that.
Yeah. Bob?
Well, I was in the crowd here, and everybody was just going absolutely wild. I heard the name come in over my cell phone, and all of a sudden, not only were the people you would expect cheering him, I heard a bunch of Italians say, "Il Papa Americano." So it was a shock. It was a shock that it was him, and it was a shock that it was so soon. But I think we're all settling into the idea, and it's a new moment in the church, that's for sure.
Well, look, Prevost was just made a cardinal by Pope Francis in 2023, and he became prefect of the Dicastery of Bishops just in that window in the last 2 years. So my question, Father, why do you think the College of Cardinals shifted toward a man who was really, talk about the periphery, he was on the periphery of candidates. I mean, what happened to Parolin and Tagle, do you think?
Well, my guess is that he was able to attract different voting blocks because of his background. So, first of all, he was definitely someone that Pope Francis liked and appreciated because he brought him here from Chiclayo in Peru, made him the prefect of the Dicastery for Bishops, and then made him a cardinal. Yeah. And he got much favor, I think, from Pope Francis. Yeah. Secondly, he's a North American who is identified himself as a South American because he became a Peruvian citizen when he was named Bishop of Chiclayo. So he could appeal to both ends of the American continent. And then as a missionary and a religious order priest, he would appeal to many people throughout the world because missionaries are one of the glories of the church, that they leave their home country to go preach the gospel.
So he covers a lot of bases.
Yes.
Cardinal Prevost is an Augustinian priest now, Leo. An order dedicated to the rule of St. Augustine and founded in 1244. Bob, what does that Augustinian tradition and spirituality tell you about the mind, the style, and soon the pontificate of Leo the 14th?
Well, you know, one of the great terms in the theology of St. Augustine is the heart. Our hearts, he says, he at the beginning of his confessions, he says, our hearts are restless till they rest in thee. And so I think that there's a portion of that in almost every one of the Augustinians. My guess is that in his case here, he was also able to, he presents himself very, very well. He comes across as a mature, steady hand. He no doubt had lots of interactions when he was head of the office for naming bishops, and in that sense probably had not only had the geographic distribution that Father was talking about, but he actually had a personal interaction with a lot of the people who may eventually have voted for him. So he happened to be the right guy at the right intersection at the right time.
Yeah. Pope Leo's brother, John Prevost, who has been interviewed extensively over the last day or so, he's given us quite a bit of information about what kind of pope his brother might be, particularly regarding immigration and hot-button issues like same-sex marriage. Take a look.
I think you'll see a second Pope Francis, I think. I don't want to speak for him, but I think he sees the United States is headed in the wrong direction in terms of immigration. That this is a total injustice. These are people. Doesn't matter where they're born, they are people first. And so they need to be treated as people first. The war, it's got to be, I don't know how he would handle that. It's a very difficult situation because you're going to offend someone one way or the other no matter what. Gay marriage, did you say? I think he will follow what the church has traditionally said about that, I think.
Father, he indicates that his brother's very much in line with Pope Francis. Do you entirely buy that?
In some ways he is, but other ways he isn't. I mean, I'll remind our viewers that he is a canon lawyer. Pope Leo the 14th studied canon law at the Angelicum University, And he taught canon law for 10 years in Peru as a professor at the Augustinian Seminary. Now, I'm a canon lawyer, so I'm kind of prejudiced in favor of fellow canon lawyers.
Are you running for the next pope? Is that what you're doing here?
No, I'm just running
checking
to be on the Papal Posse. That's good enough.
You have an esteemed spot forever.
Well, thank you.
Don't
you
worry.
How do you like the hat, by the way?
I love the hat, and I have a matching one that I didn't wear because I
too
forgot.
bad.
Bob, your reaction to the brother's comments that there's a problem in the country vis-a-vis immigration, that's not the Pope's job.
Yeah, and I think whatever the Pope says about immigration, we know in the United States and also in Europe that there's just a crisis of how large a wave of illegal immigrants have come in that disrupt the society, and that's not going to basically go
including
anywhere.
here in Italy.
Yeah. But I'm intrigued by the way he's gone back and chosen the name Leo the 14th, which takes us back to the very beginnings of modern Catholic social thought. So he's got that sort of forwarded in his own name, and it'll be interesting to see. I hope he does not take a kind of a Latin American liberation theology turn or this sort of tercermundismo that really focuses on the poor as explaining something about the world, but as an American brings a new perspective to Rome.
Father, at only 69 years old, Pope Leo is relatively young among the College of Cardinals. And though American by birth, he spent, as we've been discussing, the bulk of his life and missionary work in Peru. He was a bishop there, later becoming a bishop. And he has a mathematics background from his undergrad time at Villanova, as well as a doctorate in canon law, which you referenced. Your thoughts on how that particular educational background and the mind of a canon lawyer might focus this pontificate on issues and problems that we've been discussing for the last 12 years?
Sure. Well, I'll say this. He looks like he's in great physical shape. I know he's a tennis player, so I hope he's able to find some tennis courts. There are courts at the North American College.
Oh, at the college,
so
not
maybe he'll
in the
be able
yard.
to play there, but maybe he'll put one at Castle Gandolfo. Yeah. No, I think being a canon lawyer will help him in dealing with the crises and issues that always come across the papal desk. And Pope Francis really didn't have much regard for canon law. Just we know that by the way he acted. He basically disregarded some of the laws. He issued what are called motu proprios, which are basically decrees. So rather than letting things take their course, he kind of intervened personally. I think Pope Leo is going to respect the canonical processes, which also include the department heads taking the lead on different issues and not simply everything having to go across the papal desk right from the beginning.
Bob and Father, I bet you have a thought on this too. Your thoughts on where Pope Leo should and how he should approach Pope Francis's ban on the old traditional Latin Mass. How urgent is that?
Well, it may not be something that he wants to do immediately because there's so much else that comes with becoming Pope. But I think in the medium term, certainly within this first year, it would be a good thing for him to eliminate that ban because it would bring back into the church a very growing and dynamic part of the church. It doesn't have to dominate the rest of the church. Lots of people go to the Novus Ordo Mass and they're quite comfortable and they benefit from it. But to dismiss one of the parts of the church that is the most passionate and the most faithful to the church, I think it would be a mistake for him to continue that.
Worried to roll back that ban on the traditional Latin Mass and just return to what Benedict did, which is say, if a priest wants to say it, he can say it. What would that do to heal the divide between traditionalists and in the church that many feel?
I think this is an easy win for him because restoring the Latin Mass is simply going back to the situation that was under Pope Benedict and which was very beneficial. Yeah. And I think for him, having people be grateful for him to doing something that facilitates their spiritual life, it fits in with his homily today at Mass in which he talked about proclaiming Christ. That really, people go to the Latin Mass because they say, I feel closer to God at it. Let them do that.
And the mystical, supernatural power of the Mass
is
more tangible. So they say. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Some.
But it is for them.
Yeah.
And that should be good enough. It's a Mass of the Ages. In his Urbi et Orbi address, Pope Leo, right after his election, expressed the following that may give us some insight into how he will continue this Petrine ministry post-Francis. Watch.
Dobbiamo cercare insieme come essere una chiesa missionaria.
Look at how we can together be a missionary church, a church that builds bridges, that is always open to receive everyone, just like in this square, to receive everyone, to welcome everyone. Our charity, our dialogue and love,
Vogliamo essere una chiesa sinodale, una chiesa
We need to be a synodal church, a church that's a pilgrim, that shows charity always, and especially is charitable to those who are suffering.
Bob, some of that language there in line with Pope Francis, the echo of synodality, which made me clench just a bit, I won't lie. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, all of that is true, but I think when we heard those words during the Francis papacy, what was missing was kind of a sense of urgency about evangelization. You know, there's talk about it, but there doesn't just seem to be the desire to put a lot of energy in moving outward rather than talking internally with these synodal conversations that seem to go on and on forever. So, look, we know that the Pope Francis set up this synodal assembly that's supposed to take place in 2028. If that goes on, that'll be a long shadow from this papacy. And in June, we've got coming up the reports from these study groups that were left over after the October Synod this past year, and their reports are due in June. It'll be very interesting to see what Leo does with those. He may put them in his pocket for a while. He may tout them highly, and it'll give us an indication of how he's thinking concretely about synodality.
Do you want to have a comment about synodality?
Yeah, no, this will be one of the major indications of what direction the pontificate's going, because the synodality is still an unknown quantity.
Yeah, nobody knows what it means.
And it largely depended on what Pope Francis decided. You know, he decided this and that. The last decision was there's not going to be a synod in 2028. There's going to be a ecclesial assembly, which is going to include basically 1/3 bishops, 1/3 laity, 1/3 others, clergy and religious. That's at least what we're understanding it to be. This looks like an Anglican assembly. It looks like something that, you know, was invented in Canterbury. The Catholic Church does not consider lay people to be shepherds. Yeah. And this, if you put them in an assembly and vote to do this and that pastorally, that's undermining the hierarchy. The hierarchical structure of the Church needs to be defended. I'm hoping that Pope Leo will modify this and put it back in line with what Paul VI did when he created the Synod of Bishops.
And for our non-Catholic viewers, that hierarchical church was not created by men. Right. It was created by Jesus Christ. He said, you 12, come here. I'm giving you the key. And then you all go out. This is it. I'm not taking everybody. I'm not taking all the disciples, just you all. That's the Lord's choice and prerogative. And now you have to follow through on that. You can't. I agree with you. I think we're going to see an adaptation of synodality and a redefinition of it in the same way Pope Francis tried to redefine Vatican II and liturgy and many other things. Given the effusive praise we have seen, the enthusiasm from more progressive figures in the church like Austin Ivory and LGBT activist Father James Martin, who I saw the other day out here, do you see Pope Leo softening his former position? He is quoted as saying he had a difficulty with the homosexual lifestyle and people adopting children, gay couples adopting children. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he's emphasized quite a bit the nature of the family, the natural and divine nature of the family, and just what human sexuality is for. So I'd be very surprised if, as a pope, he would go back on that. I would like to see him be especially wary, because this is not. Some people kind of think of this as a nice conversation with, some Catholics who happen to be same-sex attracted. What he's really going to be facing is immense pressure by LGBT activists. And I think that Francis sometimes misunderstood that, and that in his sincere desire to reach out to people he believed were marginalized, didn't realize the kind of benefit he was giving to activists rather than just individual people.
Your thoughts on what we know so far about Pope Leo's thoughts on abortion. We know he's very pro-life. You even see that on his Twitter feed. And he's very worried about the power of media and how it's distorted and undermined the family and marriage.
Yeah, and he also criticized gender ideology and its imposition, trying to convince children that there are more than male and female. No, I think what Bob's comments summarize very well the challenge that the Pope is facing. And by all indications, Pope Leo has been consistent in upholding church teaching in this matter. And then, we have to redefine the nature of charity. Charity is truth. Charity is not pretense. If we pretend and make believe that homosexual attraction is a natural occurrence that has to be supported, and that homosexual activity is equal to normal sexual activity, we're going down a dead end. It's contradicting the nature of revelation and natural law. So I don't think we're going to go down that route. But I know, as you say, there's an activist mob out there which is browbeating the Catholic Church to say homosexuality is equal to heterosexuality. It simply is not the case.
What should we be on the lookout for in the coming days as this pontificate begins, Bob? I mean, we've already seen in that opening mass, in his coming out party here, a very different look, at least, to the Pope we've become accustomed to over the last 12 years.
Well, it's going to be interesting, I think, to see how much he wants to be a media figure, because I don't know that it's always important for a Pope to be a media figure. It's important for us to be media figures,
Yeah, that's right.
Of course. But if he can work solidly, maturely behind the scenes and really establish the church in a way that I've always thought we have tremendous teaching inside the church, but to bring that out to people even at the parish level, at the national level, that should be at this moment in history, in my view, what a church leader should be doing. Not so much worrying about climate change and immigration and all those other things that we hear about. We've got to tend to the Catholic garden. And we've got to make sure that the people who are inside that with us are receiving the fullness of the faith.
And that Catholic garden is in trouble. We have to say that. Finances are in trouble, ordinations are in trouble, seminarians are in trouble. All those numbers are plumb line down, particularly over the last 12 years. I don't know if you've been hearing that, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
What must he address first? And
well, I would say this. He should declare a moratorium on papal trips and spend the first year getting people together to figure out the finances of the Vatican. And this is one of the great things about having an American Pope, because in the American and English-speaking world, there are a lot of very competent people who know how to do turnarounds. And, the Vatican deficit on pensions, for instance, that can be solved if you get good management together, identify your resources, and cut your costs. I think that requires a lot of attention. I hope he would do what Pope Francis did originally, get a figure like Cardinal Pell in, who brought in experts from Australia, and started not only uncover the assets, but decide we have to do something to invest these better. I would say papal trips are wonderful, but you show the seriousness. Let's get the house in order. We can pay for ourselves. Then we can do other things.
Chicago would probably disagree with you, but all my friends in Chicago, I'm with you. Okay, we will leave it there. Thank you, Posse. And look, if you want more of us, go to Arroyo Grande Show at YouTube for more daily updates. The Conclave crew, the three of us, dove into really the record of Pope Leo and what it will mean to the future. The latest episode is up. Thank you for being here.